Well, good morning, guys. Once again, it is I, the chairman, back reviewing physical media. And this week, we have a few things that came in. And so what happened was that I got from Amazon, 3 for 2 sale. We got Guy Ritchie's classic Snatch from Sony. Got in Howard the Duck that came out early this year from Universal. Stand By Me, also from Sony. And separately, but also from Sony, uh, the John McTiernan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, relatively unloved film from 1991, I believe, or is it? What year is it? 1992? I forget. Last Action Hero, which is kind of a send-up of the whole action movie genre that Schwarzenegger himself helped to popularize. And this has been given a pretty good 4K remaster and restoration, so I'm looking forward to giving this a watch. But what we did do is that my son and I watched through both Stand By Me and Howard the Duck. I've been kind of inundating him with 80s films recently, kind of going back to my childhood, and he's been liking them. I mean, you know, he's only 9 years old, so it's like you only know what you only know so much, and you can only appreciate so much from his perspective of watching YouTube and iPads and internet and everything being at your fingertips. But just trying to give him a little bit of a perspective on how things were back in the day. And so we watched Howard the Duck first because he did have a passing familiarity with Howard the Duck, having shown up in Guardians of the Galaxy. So, but this was obviously a very different take on Howard the Duck than what we did see from the very brief appearances of him in Guardians of the Galaxy. And so this film obviously has an interesting place in the pop culture geekosphere, because it clearly was a bomb when it first premiered. It was a George Lucas production. Gloria Katz and Willard Huyck co-wrote the film, and Willard Huyck directed it. And I mean, you could definitely tell why it didn't take off. It was fairly goofy. The effects were obviously not up to par with what they are now. The performances were, pretty hammy. It's kind of a take it or leave it presentation of Howard. I mean, if you're just kind of turned off with the whole way that he looks, with the whole way that he had to be done in order to be successfully rendered on screen, it might have been a turnoff for you. And obviously, it did have a lot of those 80s just kind of hokiness and corniness about it. But in the minds of a lot of cult fans, I can definitely see, and I myself did see the appeal of this film. I mean, there is a lot to like in this film. The presentation of Howard is done fairly appealingly. I mean, he comes off as a likable, fairly likable guy. I mean, you can understand his situation. He's been thrown off his planet. He's on a completely unfamiliar and strange world. Kind of similar in the sense that they both speak English and can drink beer, but otherwise it's completely foreign. And he doesn't know anybody, doesn't have any place to go. So he meets Beverly, and they hit it off. And the chemistry between Howard and Beverly, as played by Lea Thompson, was always something that was very endearing to me. I have to admit that I did have a crush on Lea Thompson during that time. I mean, obviously she played Marty McFly's mother, Lorraine. You can't can't deny that she had a very much of a girl next door beauty about her, and so it's easy to fall in love with her, to really see what kind of a overall nice person, and just a pure kind of good nature about her. And I think that's why, at least in the sense of this film, the relationship between Howard and Beverly kind of works, is because of what Lea Thompson brings to the screen, and the fact that she could have chemistry with a little dude in a in a costume with an animatronic face. And I think that kind of also brings me to a interesting thought that I had about why this film was. I mean, it obviously wasn't successful in terms of monetarily, but just successful in terms of endearing itself to the fans that it did endear itself to, as opposed to how a Howard the Duck film that would be made today might not be so successful. And it was because, in a strange way, I think that because of the restrictions of the time, the constrained technology, that the filmmakers had to fully animate Howard using using an actor in a suit, and they had to do his whole head animatronics practically. It all had to be real in the sense that it was all occurring on set with the actors, and because of having to put an actual human actor in the suit, therefore the shape of him was like the shape of a human. And in that way, when you look at him, I mean, he looks like a little kid. He has the same body proportions, the same general shape as a kid, just that obviously he's got a duck face and he's got white feathers all over. But the thing is that if they were to make this film today, say if you were to take the James Gunn Howard the Duck from Guardians of the Galaxy and make him into a film, well, he'd be CGI. He wouldn't have to have the same body size and shape. He'd probably be smaller. He'd be thinner because he'd obviously be more anatomically correct in terms of duck shape. But I think that takes away a lot of the appeal of the Howard character if you make him look like that. If you make him look like, for example, when he appeared in What If, he just I just don't feel like you could relate to him as well as a character. You relate to him more as a duck as opposed to essentially a human-sized person who just happens to look like a duck. Which I think that's the thing about Howard in this film, is that he's just a guy, but he just happens to have a duck face and body. If you understand what I'm saying. Whereas in a modern film, he'd be more of a duck that just happens to speak. And I don't know if that would go over as well, because we obviously have seen a very successful rendition of essentially an anthropomorphized animal in the MCU with Rocket. But I think the difference is that the advantage with Rocket is that the raccoon is already kind of cute looking already, and plus he has such a such a forceful personality that he just kind of wins you over. I mean, you just end up liking him. And I'm kind of not sure if Howard, done in that same way, could carry off a whole film the way Rocket would. And obviously Rocket's not the main character in any of the films, so it's not like he's being asked to carry the load of being the main character, whereas Howard would be. So, I mean, I guess that's partially why I don't think we'll ever see a live-action Howard the Duck, just because it just wouldn't go over as well as the 1986 version would have. But, that's just my thoughts from me having been a fan of the film from 1986. So, your mileage may vary in terms of whether you think Howard the Duck could happen today. Anyway, so then we also watched through Stand By Me. Yeah, Stand By Me, obviously, among the two films, is the more popular and the more well-regarded. It's obviously a classic of that era in the mid-'80s, where we did have that nostalgia for the 50s. We had Back to the Future, which presented a much lighter, much family-friendlier vision of the 50s as opposed to this one, which was much. This film still isn't. I wouldn't consider it dark, but it does. I mean, there's obviously a lot of swearing in it. There's a little bit of violence, but it's just more adult in the sense that you see the whole adventure of these kids, but it's framed through the lens of their growing up. Like, it's their last big adventure together. It's clearly a coming of age story. It's a transition from them going from elementary school to junior high, it's the end of summer. It's all kind of coming together and coalescing in both kind of a big send off, because then at the end of the film, the friends start going their separate ways. They don't really ever get back together and have the same experiences as they did before. So um, I guess in a sense that's why this film really resonated with people, because it made themselves think of their own childhood, their own friendships. Um, I myself, I mean, I was exactly the same age watching this film as the kids were when it came out in 1986. I was 12, so I guess it definitely did connect with me in that same sense. Um, and it's really easy to see the endearing popularity of this film, in that even though it was based on a Stephen King novella, and it was a little bit different than what Stephen King had been doing, but still, um, a lot of his works are kind of told through the lens of his own childhood. I mean, he oftentimes sets his stories in that time in which he himself was the same age as the characters in the story, such as It. It takes place in 1958. The kids are like 11 years old. Stephen King was 11 years old in 1958, and in this, and in Stand By Me, which is based on the Body, it's 1959. The kids are 12. He's the same age. So, he's obviously writing from a position of familiarity with telling the story. So in terms of how this looked, I would say this film doesn't look as good as other Sony 4Ks that have come out. Um, it never looked amazing. I mean, it didn't look bad, but it was definitely grainier than other films that they have put out. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just not as visually spectacular as other discs that they have put out. And it's not really because they did a poor job at all. It's just that I don't think there was a lot to show in this film. I mean, obviously they're outside, they're walking around. There's a lot of outdoor exterior scenes. You would expect them to look a little bit more spectacular, but it kind of didn't. So, I mean, it doesn't draw away from the film at all. It's just, I'm just saying that, don't go into this film on 4K expecting to see amazing scenery, because you won't get it, but it also won't look bad. So it's a pretty middle of the road 4K in that sense. So yeah. So anyway, I'm still watching through Blade Runner 2049, and my impressions is that obviously it looks amazing. It's definitely an interesting modernized take on the Blade Runner mythology. I do think that one thing that's missing from it is that feeling of film noir, that tone that the original had, because the original was very clearly a film noir through and through, and this film, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe. It's kind of hard to describe exactly what this film is about. I mean, obviously I'm not done with it. I do know what happens to the rest of the film, because I have read or heard of spoilers of it, because it's been out for a couple years. So I kind of know what to expect. I just don't know exactly how it's all going to unfold, because I've either forgotten about the exact details, or I just never read those details. I just know that kind of the basic things that happen at the end of the film. But it comes off to me more of like an adventure film, as opposed to an action adventure film, as opposed to like the very clear film noir that we were getting with the 1981 Ridley Scott directed Blade Runner. But anyway, once I get done with that, I will give you my impressions of it, and I have I believe I still have something coming from oh well, I still have Deep Red coming. I did have Arrows the Hills Have Eyes on pre-order, but I canceled that because I just got too many other things coming in. I picked up an order from NBD of Blue Underground films of Uncle Jess, so I'm looking forward to getting those in, because those are ones that I've been wanting to get for a long time, and I will show those off to you. But otherwise, have a good one, and I will talk to you later. See you.